Hello. Good noon, because it is noon, because it's not either morning or afternoon. Hello, everybody. If you are here already, you are super eager and super keen. I can imagine Lauren's here. That's probably the one person I know who will be here waiting for us. If you are here, Lauren, say hello. A little comments. But for everybody else, we won't just start straight away. I'll give you a bit of an opportunity to join. So normally about 90 seconds. Which is always interesting. Scott, I think you've probably listened to one of the podcasts back. There is always this moment for about 90 seconds, 2 minutes, where I just ramble. So I hope you're enjoying it too.
Yep, I'm here for it. It'll be interesting to see how it changes from podcast to podcast. Cheers.
Yeah, and I'm so lazy, I don't ever cut it out. But I think it's just some of the best bits. This is where you get the best insights from me just rambling about anything really. But if you are here and you are joining, please say hello. Add your questions, even just saying hello, tell me where you're from and why you're interested in listening to this. Add that to the comments and we can get some more insights into that specific area as well. But yeah, please ask questions as much as possible. And my Wi-Fi is telling me that it's rubbish, so I'm just going to turn this off. That did nothing. That does a better job. And so that we don't get distractions. That's a bit better. Look, it's improved a little bit. So, look, it is 90 seconds in. We'll get started, Scott. Are you happy with that? Are you ready?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no pressure. Fantastic. Hello, everybody. It's lovely to see you all. I'm really looking forward to this conversation for two reasons. First reason is I really love the concept of strengths and how that impacts our performance. So I've added it to my performance framework, and so I see there being real value in working to our strengths and playing to our strengths. And secondly, the conversation with Scott around this, mainly because of his knowledge in this, but also because of when we met and had this initial chat, the ability Scott has to use examples from sport was fantastic. And I'm like, we're just going to have a conversation around sport potentially. But we won't do that, Scott. I hope it's not just that. But I do think some of the examples you come up with to showcase this is fantastic as well. So rather than me rambling, thank you for joining me, Scott. Please say hello to the audience, and then I will get a proper intro after that.
Yeah, fantastic. Hi, everybody. Thanks very much for taking the time to join us this now afternoon, afternoon. Here in the UK. Really looking forward to having the conversation and excited to delve in because I love sport almost as much as I love strengths. It's a very close thing. And even just earlier this week, I wasn't very well and I was in my bed. I was listening to TMS and thinking about what was happening in the test match and kind of immediately thinking about strengths and how that might be something that we talk about. So very excited to be able to do this with you. Yeah,
I love that. And I do the exact same thing when watching all sports, especially when it's like so individualized as well. So look, I'm gonna get some introductions. I'm gonna do mine quickly and get mine out of the way, and then it's over to you. And I've got lots of great questions, hopefully that you can give some insights to. So if you don't know who I am and you're from Scott's network and you haven't connected with me on LinkedIn, my name's Rich. I am a leadership performance coach and facilitator, and I deliver and support individuals and teams and leadership create high performance through a few different angles. One of those angles being lessons from sport, the other with my own framework, and the other one around understanding people and teams and how they communicate effectively. I also run a wellbeing company, and this is where the wellbeing chat originated from. I help organizations improve their health and well-being and the individuals within that as well. And I've had the luxury to talking to amazing people like Scott, talk around how people can improve their health, improve their performance, improve their well-being. And it's something I love to do. So yeah, that's me. If you want to know more about LP Revolution or Employees Health, then please let me know. We can set up a call afterwards. That's me, Scott. Over to you. Please introduce yourself. Tell me who you are, what you do, etc., etc.
Brilliant. Thanks, Rich. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Scott Christie. I'm the head of training and integration at Strengthscope. Strengthscope's a strengths development business that helps people understand how to be their best selves in work and life every day. You can see some things behind me. These are some of the things that help people understand my strengths. And when we talk about strengths, we talk about these underlying qualities that energize us and that we're great at or have the potential to be great at. So we'll dig into some of this, and I'll probably use some of these as examples for myself. Be interesting as I think about my own sporting career. Not that I was ever a professional sportsman, just to be really clear about that, but my amateur status and how that might have come out in terms of how I played in teams from a sports perspective as well. But Strengthscope really works to try and help teams be really effective. So by being able to understand the things that energize you and motivate you and play to those more, you're more likely to go from great to exceptional, rather than focusing on those areas that are seen as potential weaknesses, for example, where you're only ever really going to go from below average to average, and you're not going to get the best outcomes from that. So that's just a little bit about us, and I'm sure that more will come out as we go through the next hour or so.
Yeah, wicked. Before I kind of move into the questions, what kind of work are you doing with Strengthscope, and what are you seeing the impact being?
So a lot of the work that we're doing at the moment is around helping teams understand each other. I think that there's been so much and such significant levels of change in business in particular that there's constant churn in teams, whether that's the individuals within teams, whether that's them shifting priorities or pivoting their purpose. We've seen an awful lot through the past couple of years through higher levels of both career mobility, but also that kind of post-pandemic idea of the great resignation, where people were just like, actually, you know what? I don't want to be in, for example, digital marketing. I want to work at a farm. That's the thing that's going to really, really bring me fulfillment. And we talk an awful lot about being your authentic self, trying to have a more fulfilling work life by playing to your strengths. But I think that what's also happened is that some of those choices have been great, but with the economic situation that we find ourselves in at the moment, and some of the pressures that come from some of the geopolitical events that are going on, people are moving back into the corporate workspace as well, but they're coming back with a different sense of what they want from their work experience, not just in terms of those kind of classic hygiene factors like annual leave and decent pay and paternity or maternity leave and things like that, but also in terms of the kind of work that they do. So that's where we're able to go in and work with teams to kind of go beyond role titles, essentially, almost to a certain extent beyond seniority as well, to be able to think about how are you able to get the right pegs in your holes, and not just from here's the skills and experience that I have, but here's the stuff that's going to get me at my best at work. So we take people through workshops, we accredit people in our tools to then be able to do that for themselves and their organizations, if that's the way that they find is going to be most scalable and most effective. Because we recognize that with that churn and change, time to be able to stop and not just be doing is very valuable and very rare. But when they do take the time to do that, the power of that is really, really tangible. And what we also try and do is go, okay, great. How do you keep that alive? How do you not just have a really great half-day session or a 2-hour session with us or with the practitioners within your business? How do you keep on thinking about playing to your strengths? Even just take 5 minutes to reflect about, okay, here's my strengths picture. Here's my profile. How can I use these most effectively throughout the meetings, the relationships, the tasks that I've got coming up? So that's really where we're going, and we're trying to help people make these more intentional, conscious choices to help them be at their best and enjoy the experience more and more.
Yeah, I love that. What's the question? And what response are you getting from those people and those teams?
I think that there's a mixture of responses, and I think it depends on the kind of the culture and the experience up till now. So we've worked with some teams that have gone through some significant change. And for some of them, by creating and holding a space that we set up to be as psychologically safe as they want to be, that for some teams has allowed them to be able to challenge some things around. For example, we have our model, which is called the Peak Performing Team Pathway. And the very start of that, and the way that teams are set up most effectively, is by having super clear goals and aspirations, a really clear purpose. And within that, everybody understands where their contribution is coming. Everybody understands their role, their expected outcomes, and also there's clear kind of milestones along the way. So it's not just kind of like we want to have £1 billion valuation. Sounds huge if you're, say, for example, a startup saying that. How do you know you're getting there? How do you know where your individual contribution is? And how do you connect with a purpose such as that? Not just in terms of this is the work that I'm doing, but this is how I feel. I want to be part of this journey as well. So I think that that's one of the biggest things that we try and do. And for us in that space, it's about being able to drive clarity. And I think that that's where we're seeing an awful lot of impact happen, actually. So a lot of people think, oh, you know what? It's about feedback. Yes, it is about feedback. And it's definitely something that I'll talk to later. Because that's often one of the hardest things to be able to do, particularly if you're in a space that doesn't feel or hasn't had the focus on developing a strong, psychologically safe space for a team or an organization to work in. But having that clarity of goals and where you're contributing to it actually sets everything else up for success. And it's one of the things that often there isn't the time to do, or people don't feel that that's important. Or often it's kind of coming from above and it's kind of like, this is what we're going to do. And there's not the space and time for people to go, why and how and what and me. And so they just kind of go, oh, well, that's what I've been told. That buy-in, that engagement, that skin in the game, essentially, just isn't there. And so being able to start off by creating that space to then think about, okay, now you know where you sit and you've got a connection with why you're here as part of this team. How can you then use these strengths effectively to be able to drive that value? Because if you've got that stake in it, you want it to succeed. So a lot of the work that we're doing is even just at about that very starting level, because with the pace at which people are working at, that is often the thing that gets missed. And particularly through change, you've got to realize you've got to reestablish this. You've got to re-clarify exactly what are we aiming to do here? What's changed? What does that mean for my role, for how our team's operating, where our focus needs to be? So there's a lot of that work that comes in that then allows people to kind of go, okay, right. So now that I have that understanding, I can now use this really effectively to achieve my individual and our collective goals, which is where I think the key starting point needs to be for any team in business or in sport. If you don't have that clear objectives, then you can have some of the best talent in the world. You can have some of the best coaches in the world, but they're all going and expecting different things, or they're seeing different measures of success. And that's where you're going to have a lack of cohesion and probably not going to get the kind of results that you're looking for.
Yeah, I completely agree. Vision is the starting point, right? It's I'm playing with this with my framework. Is like you can't build a house without knowing what the house what you want the house to look like, right? And it's the same for an organization. Yeah. But I think there's a big difference when you're talking there about kind of allowing people to work to those strengths and using those strengths. I actually think people that do this well, and I'd love to hear your insight on this, is that people who do this well isn't these are the tasks, these are the things you're going to do. It's what are your strengths as an individual in this team, or what strengths do we have as a team in our people, and go, okay, so we know we've got these are the tasks that we've got. How can I use these people to play to their strengths to make sure that we are performing? And it's the same as on a football pitch, right? We have a formation, we have a vision. I've got this group of people. These are going to be the strengths, or this is how I would like us to play, or the way that we want to do this. Have I got the people to do that, and the people with the strengths to do that? And let's make sure that we are giving those people the opportunity to do that with their strengths.
Yeah.
Which I think is more important than, okay, here's how you're going to run your role. How do you get your strengths into that? Actually, let's use the way that we're setting up these tasks and these expectations using that. Well, this is aligned to your strengths already.
But I think that there's also the opportunity to be agile with strengths. So talking about football, my favourite sport, I'm an Aberdeen fan, so I'm still riding high off of our Scottish Cup win just around about a month ago. Looking forward to a European adventure. It'll be great. I'm really hoping we get Palace, because that's my local team geographically as well. But here over my shoulder, there's three strengths there, and I think that encompasses what my attitude. And I think this is the important thing. This is nothing to do with my skills as a footballer, but my attitude when playing for teams. So at school, in secondary school, I was part of a team that won all of our local trophies, got to the semi-final of the Scottish Cup, and I played right back for the majority of the season. Got an injury, got replaced. It was a really good team, unsurprisingly. Couldn't force my way back in, but came on as sub a lot of times afterwards. And then I played for the Aberdeen Supporters Club down here in London, where I'm based. And I played up front. Now you'd kind of go, oh, well, the skill set's very, very different for that. But actually, in terms of team, I didn't really care where I played because I loved football. But also that comes out in these three strengths that you see. So creativity, can't quite say that I'm like Leo Messi or even Kevin De Bruyne. But what that's actually about is more problem solving. So I was able to fit into different roles in the team according to what the team needed. So depending on if we were playing a team that was technically far better than us, a lot of the time what I would do, particularly for the supporters club up front, is I was kind of like the original gegenpresser. I was the Emil Heskey, if anybody's of that kind of age. I wasn't very much a goal scorer, but I would defend from the front, and I would find the right ways to be able to do that. If we were playing a team that wasn't as technically good as us, then I would change my position. I would try and stretch them an awful lot to create more space for the talent that was on the wings in midfield. So that's how that creativity would come up. And then leading, I wasn't captain of the team, but from our definition of what leading is, that's about getting everybody together towards a common goal. I was vocal. I was encouraging to everyone in the team. I would never calling anybody out. I wouldn't be kind of a huffy Cristiano Ronaldo kind of pose going on. If it didn't work, it didn't work. But at least you're trying and you're here and you turned up on a wet Sunday morning on Clapham Common. So I'm going to appreciate you. And that's how that leading would come out. And the collaboration is really about overcoming conflict and being able to pull people together again towards a common goal. So again, that's really kind of classic teamship and teammateship that kind of comes out. So as I think about how my strengths have come out in my life and in that kind of situation, then it's really clear that was the value that I got from it, but also the value that I gave. So while I think about my skill set being, let's say, limited but broad, in terms of being part of a team, that's why I was often picked, because they knew it would be maximum effort all the time. And you know, that's where the difference comes. You know, you see some, and I know some players that I played with, particularly at school, really high skill set, but the attitude wasn't quite there in the same way. And I was one of those where the attitude was really good, but the skills weren't that great as well. And I think that that's where, when you get those combinations of strengths, and that's how it works. It's a bit like, it's like a football team. You need, like, particularly in midfield, you need someone to be able to be there to plug the holes, to shield the defense. You need someone to be able to create. You need someone to be able to run with the ball. Sometimes you'll have those combinations within two players rather than three players. But it's about how to leverage and be agile with those strengths. And you see really good examples with the likes of Man City, for example. You look at the young lad Rico Lewis. He can play at fullback. He can play in defensive midfield. The way that he plays and his talent is undeniable. It's about then how he's agile with that in the given role that he's got. So in a similar kind of way, commercially, we say that strengths are role agnostic. You don't have to have certain strengths in order to play a specific role. Obviously, much the same as in a football team, you may have strengths that would naturally play to some roles better than others. But you can, if you've got the right attitude, leverage how you use those strengths in order to help the team in particular situations.
I think, and this is where I might come back to the performance question I want to ask, is that if, for example, like Rico Lewis, did you use an example? He obviously has been playing in lots of different positions, right? But if he was put in a position where he didn't feel comfortable or like he was adding value or didn't enjoy, then his performance is going to drop.
Why would you think his performance would drop if he was in a space where he was really enjoying it? Because then hopefully he'd thrive.
But I think if he's not playing to his strengths and not utilising the strengths he sees, although he's obviously in a team and like playing Man City is incredible, right? But if you're not being able to utilise those strengths, and let's take it back into the workplace, if your strengths are, I don't know, networking, communication, winning people over, but actually you've been stuck in the office just doing admin all week. If you haven't had any opportunity to be part of a team or be part of that networking, or those environments where actually it's around people, but you've been sat indoors, you're not going to be happy. You're not going to perform in those positions, in that task, because you're being set.
Yeah, and I think that this is where, when it comes to teams of any kind, feedback is absolutely key. I talked about this, as you know, at the recent CIPD conference at London Excel. If you don't have that dialogue between the person and their manager to be able to say, you know what, you're not getting me at my best. What can we do to allow me more of that? And where is that then adding value? Because sometimes you just have to take one for the team. You have to go, you know what, actually, at least I'm playing a part here, but I want to make sure that I'm going to get the opportunity to do more. You think about being able to make sure that people feel valued as well. And a great example for me is Scott McTominay at the moment, right? He filled lots of holes for Man United, never seemed to be trusted to be able to really play to his strengths. He's gone to Napoli. He's got player of the season over there. His team have won the Scudetto. And that is by him being able to work with a manager, and a manager also believing in them, and then going, you know what, I'm going to let you play to your strengths, because that's going to help us succeed. You know, so it comes down to that dialogue. And if you don't have an environment where there is that ability to have that feedback loop, you know, and you'll see this, you know, particularly with older school managers. And I wouldn't include the likes of Alex Ferguson in this, for example, but older school managers, where it's sort of like my way or the highway, and you'll do as I tell you. Fergie gave that impression, for example, to the press, but all of the players talk about how he nurtured them, how he got them to develop skills that he could see were going to be really useful in the future. That's feedback. That's succession planning. That's thinking about progress, you know? And that's a very different thing. If a lot of managers in the commercial world these days are so focused on just the underlying results, that's where you see organizational change happen before you're thinking about how you're properly developing, getting the most from the talent you already have. And when you think about the cost of redundancies, the cost of rehiring, of restructuring, then actually I think a lot of businesses are missing a trick by not being able to go, okay, actually, who have we got? And is there untapped potential there? Because again, when we talk about this definition of strengths, about these underlying qualities that energize us and that we're great at or have the potential to be great at, what we're talking about here is where do you might actually have some natural talent? And are we as a team and an organization getting the best of you? How can we give you more opportunities to be able to do that? And I actually, before I took the Strengthscope report, which is now nearly 10 years ago, I was working at a firm, and I was, I got into running. I'm also a big fan of CSR involvement. So I said, look, let's do a charity run. So I took the lead, even though I didn't have very much status at all in the company, of being able to kind of work with the CSR team to set up an event where those of us who did lots of running were going to run almost kind of round the working day and see how many miles we could get. We set up a 1K, a 5K, and a 10K for part-time runners or aspirational runners as well in the afternoon, and we generated an awful lot of money for charity. That actually is some of the stuff that you see from my leading strength again, an awful lot from my strategic mindedness strength, that creativity strength coming in. So although that wasn't my role, I was able to make a change happen, and I was able to play to my strengths. That then awoke in me an aspiration to move into leadership. Also, I think that's where the start of being able to get that fulfillment. And again, this is where that energy goes out, but also comes in. I get that fulfillment from helping people achieve amazing things beyond maybe what they expected. And that comes from that developing other strength that you can see over my shoulder. It's probably a little bit small in terms of the writing, but that's another kind of key strength of mine. And the best thing afterwards was not how much money had we raised, actually, for me, because I'm not necessarily driven by those results. It was people coming up to me afterwards who'd run for the first time ever and went, that was really, really good. You know what? I might do that again. That set my heart alight. Not that I'm kind of super passionate about running, but they had an experience that's made them want to go further and try something new. And that is, for me, how you then start to understand, okay, how can I play to my strengths in new and different ways? While, a lot of athletes, for example, will have to transition into the corporate world at some point. There's a good chance of that, unless you are the likes of a Leo Messi. You think about Gary Neville, for example. He's transitioned into that really, really well. And he's taking his learnings from the world of football and his experiences in there and working with the media, for example, and translated that into what his own brand is now. So you're going to have to think about, how do I transition, whether that's from job to job, role to role, senior leadership level to leadership level, or completely change careers. If you're able to kind of take the time to go, okay, how does this come out? How can I then use this? People talk about transferable skills. You have these strengths. How can you transfer that natural talent and energy into a new field? You've done that yourself. So, it's definitely possible, and it can have fantastic impact on you and the people that you then work with.
Yeah, I think just before I jump into this, Sandra, thank you for joining us. Thank you for adding your insights and input. Can you see that, Scott?
Yes, again.
Yeah, fantastic. So thanks for joining. And then going back to your example around setting up the CSR, setting up the running, I think when you put yourself into using those strengths and all the, I don't know what the work you were doing is and whether that was part of your strengths and whether you're enjoying it. Actually, if you can find some things which you did enjoy, I can imagine going to work was a little bit more enjoyable because you were also following a bit of a passion or a bit of some skills or some strengths, that you were leaning into. Although the work outside of that might not have been as fun, at least you had an enjoyment thing there.
Well, this is the thing, and when I did eventually take my Strengthscope report, and I'm still so grateful to that business MVF for giving me the chance to do this. That's what changed my perspective, both on how I was being effective as a leader, because I wasn't. I was heading up a customer services team that was struggling for morale and results. I was trying to play to some of these, what you see behind me is these smaller bars. So these are not areas that are going to bring me energy. The longer the bars are in this, the more energy I'm going to get. And you should play to them more often. That's where you go from great to exceptional. These smaller bars, if you're in there for too long, you might find that you start feeling drained. And that's where sometimes you have to lean on those skills. So I built skills in like reporting and Excel and stuff like that to be able to do the job. Was it my favorite thing? No. But what I loved doing, getting up in the morning, was especially around that CSR event, was amazing. But then also, once I'd taken this, I'd started running the internal sessions for the management development course that I'd been part of the first cohort for. And this had such an effect on me. I put my hand up and said, look, if you're looking for somebody internal to do this, let me. And while I enjoyed, and it was a really great culture, some fantastic people around me, the best days were the days that I was doing Strengthscope, because it completely played to my strengths. And not only was it fulfilling, it came naturally. I felt much more confident in things like my decision making. I was able to be really present with the people that I was working with in a way that I wasn't necessarily at my desk. At my desk, I was constantly thinking about the results past, looking at the results ahead, trying to strategize too much and not necessarily dealing with the things right then and there. So, because that didn't play to my strengths quite so much. So if I'm busy focusing on results, which doesn't bring me energy, then I have to work harder at it. I'm not going to feel so fulfilled. I'll find that I might procrastinate a little bit more. But when I'm playing my strengths, that is me in flow. That is me absolutely. And you hear a lot of sportsmen talk about that sense of flow where everything just fits. And that also comes through in a physical sense as well, because we talk about energy, and some people might think that's a bit woo-woo. But actually, the days and the times when I am playing at that, I do feel more energized. I do stand taller naturally without conscious thought. And I articulate myself generally far clearer when I'm in that strengths place as well. So there's lots of those benefits that kind of come along. But I think that the part of the challenges as well is, and you talked about skills as well. People will sometimes find or assume that strengths and skills are the same thing, and they're not. And they'll assign skills to you. So, like I say, I learned I've got self-improvement as a strength. I really leaned into that to learn as much Excel as possible to be able to do reporting at a good enough level for the job that I was in. But that did take me a while. And I used to have Excel up on my screens, and people used to think, oh, he loves reporting. I'll send him a report to do. Let's give him more of that to do. He obviously loves it. No, it took me ages. And I started to stack up kind of, because I was a bit of a people pleaser, like, yeah, sure, I'll have a look at that when I get a chance. And then people are going, have you had a look at that report yet? And then I'm having to go, no, I don't think I'm going to have time, put it back. That then's not putting me in the right light. But then I was able to kind of turn around and go, you know what? It's not the detail that is exciting me about these reports. It's telling a story through that creativity and the strategic mindedness strengths that I have. So actually, I'm not the person to be able to do that, but come to me with your data and say, here's what I'm seeing. What could this mean? I can talk you through how to present it in a way that's really clear and effective, rather than you just putting up tables and tables and graphs and graphs. So being able to then think about, okay, this is how my strengths can help you. How can your strengths help me? Well, actually, I've got a report to do, and you love the data. So if you do the data side and we work on the presenting side, then it's a really nice quid pro quo, and we're both enjoying the aspects of work that we're doing. So finding that balance is really important. And that's not to say that there's not a place for skills. There absolutely is. You know, you have to go to the gym when you don't want to. So you have to build skills. And with the likes of AI coming in, you have to build knowledge. You have to build experience in some of these areas. But can you do that aligned to your strengths? Because where you have that overlap of skills development and the strengths that you have, you've got a higher ceiling for your development. And you're probably going to enjoy it an awful lot more as well, because it is going to be kind of playing to those natural energies.
The skill thing is really interesting to me, because whenever I thought of strengths beforehand, I would think about the enjoyment I have with people, same as you, facilitating, building relationships, and doing what we do, right? Yeah. But then when I thought about the things I didn't enjoy, which were my strengths, it is the admin side of things. But what's interesting in listening to you say is actually there is a part of the skill which it's not my strength, but actually the skill itself isn't not the strength. But actually, what I'm hearing is actually because my strengths are so much more stronger, that the skill I might not enjoy it because I enjoy my strengths more.
So what you'll find is if the skill doesn't match with your strength. So for example, my strength in collaboration. So if it's about bringing people together, creating a safe space, I'm going to want to continue and probably naturally build skills in that. I'm not quite by osmosis, but I'll often kind of come back after a facilitation session, reflect on why did that go particularly well? What strengths were at play there? Now, for example, I've got a skill that I've developed over time, which is around kind of time management. Now, I've got small bars in detail orientation and results focus, and not a huge amount of common sense, which is around making pragmatic decisions. So that kind of practical, detailed, admin-y style stuff doesn't come naturally to me. Now, I can develop skills there. And I think that this is actually, interestingly, where I think AI is going to allow people to play to their strengths more, particularly within those kind of areas. If that can take away the time when we're going to the gym when we don't want to, where we have to develop the skills and knowledge in order to do something more manual, it creates more space for us to focus our time and our energy really effectively on the things that we're really great at and have the potential to be really, really great at. So you can have skills that overlap with your strengths, and you can continue to develop them. You're going to have to develop some skills that don't ideally map to your strengths. And sometimes that's about what's critical to do. So it's not about building all the skills for the sake of it. Even those of us that have got self-improvement as a strength recognize that. It's about what are the things that I need to learn that will move the needle?
Mhm.
And if not, is there a bot that can do that for me? That's what I'm really excited about, really kind of leaning into more and more, is how can I leverage the likes of AI agents and assistants to be able to set all the stuff up for me that takes the time away and drains my energy, to allow me to either take that time to reflect and to plan more effectively, and then be able to kind of conserve that energy for the key situations where I need to be at my absolute best.
Mhm. I've been listening to, no, I agree with that, and this is potentially not on that topic, but I think I want to share it because of the time-wise. I've been listening to the High Performance podcast a lot. I've been a bit of a binge on it, really. And I have these quick-fire questions, and part of one of those quick-fire questions is, what is your biggest strength and biggest weakness? So many of these people, I'm shocked. It's like 95%, 90% go, my biggest strength is this, but my biggest weakness is this. Is the same thing. I should put, so my biggest strength is empathy, but my biggest weakness is empathy as well.
Yeah.
And I find that really interesting. So love to hear your insights on that and actually understand, okay, so you've got those three strengths which you've pulled out in leadership, creativity, and I can't see the other one. Collaboration. What are the weaknesses that you're aware of, or how do you have to manage weaknesses in regards to this stuff as well?
So with us, and particularly for Strengthscope, we don't use weakness as a term because we're not talking about a measurable competency. This is not generated by a cognitive test in that sense. It's about being able to kind of understand where you get more and less energy. So when it comes down to it, when we're thinking about weaknesses, we call them performance risks. So there's two key performance risks from a strengths perspective from our tool. Those smaller bars where they're potentially energy drainers. If you're in that for an extended period of time, you're not going to be at your best. So how do you adapt your strengths to be able to get the outcomes associated with that? So in order to get results, in my role, it's about using my developing other strengths, my empathy strengths, in particular when I'm working in training and facilitation, to allow people to have the best experience and also to have something that they can take away that will make a difference in their lives. That's the result I'm looking for. So I don't have to focus on the result 100%. So being able to leverage my other strengths to get that output, that's the potential. That's how we deal with that potential risk. And you also have other people, like I just explained with the kind of the Excel example. You can call on other people to help mitigate some of that risk as well. But from the point that you're saying where you might have a strength and people kind of go, actually, that's a bit of a weakness. People talk about that too much. I've got a good example from like my second week at Strengthscope. So creativity is about problem solving, ideas generating, thinking outside the box. And because I don't have a background in L&D or organizational psychology, I was so excited to get the opportunity. I really got it, I think. I need to verify this with my boss, Paul Brewerton. That I got because I'd inhabited strength so much in around about the 18 months since I'd taken the test, and I made such a difference at MVF by playing to my strengths, not only in terms of the coaching and facilitation I was doing, but actually being able to play to my strengths as a manager, turning around results, turning around a team, getting a promotion, showed that I understood how this worked really, really well. I was taken in, and it was sort of like, we're moving into the digital sphere now. This is pre-pandemic. It's kind of like, we've got clients that are looking to be able to self-serve a little bit more. What are your ideas? And it was a 20-minute session. I don't know how many sticky notes I went up on the wall, how many ideas I just kind of blurted out, wrote up on flip charts. But that strength went into overdrive because I generated lots of ideas, but I didn't think about the context. I didn't ask questions. I didn't really expect to kind of, I didn't check in on kind of what the expectations were of that session. And what we need to be able to do there is think about how these strengths kind of work together. I use the analogy from music of a mixing desk in a studio. You're never going to use just one strength at a time. That'd be like just hearing a drum beat. That's great. You have to bring some other stuff in at the same time. Now, if you want people to dance, you have that drum beat and you have some bass, for example, and people will naturally start moving. You want them to listen to the vocal, you pull that down, you push up the vocal, probably the guitar, piano as well, to get them, I'd give them a different experience. So it's the same kind of thing. I need to find other strengths to balance out that creativity, to stop it going into overdrive as we call it. So whenever I go into an idea session, I will always partner and say, I'm going to bring my creativity because we're looking for ideas, but I'm going to bring some empathy to make sure that I'm checking in on perspectives around the room as to whether this idea has legs. But I also am going to bring my strategic mindedness, because there's a big picture at work here. You know, we've got an overall goal that we're aiming for. And if I lose sight of that, that will be my creativity going into overdrive. I need to pull it back to, what are we aiming to do here? What's the big picture? What's the big goal? So that's how you use those strengths in combination. But I see where people worry about that weakness as well, because we also always have that negativity bias. So if we get feedback that that's not working or that hasn't worked well, our radar will be up so much because we put so much more psychological and emotional weight on negative experiences than we do on positive experiences. That actually the danger is we don't ever go back to use that strength because that didn't work well that one time, so I'm going to hold back on that. And actually, it stops people really being able to fulfill their potential in that sense, because they're not then again being agile and going, okay, but this context is different, this time is different, and if I'm using it with intention and I'm aware about how that strength can help, instead of just allowing it to come out naturally or to be triggered into a point where I'm using it unconsciously through pressure or ill health or cultural or value clashes. If I've got an understanding of the intent and exactly how I'm going to use it, it's going to be super powerful. So being aware about that use is really, really key, but it can sometimes tip into a place where it has a negative or unintended outcome, for sure.
Yeah, really interesting. And I really like, I'm learning quite a lot about from this conversation. First off, that skills aren't strengths, which I think has helped me understand potentially how I can perform better, which is great. But also like that you can have a task, because it's not because skills aren't, because strengths aren't skills, you can use different strengths to use to overcome that task. It's just knowing what strengths to use to get the most out of it. And I think people look at strengths similar to skills and go, well, if I'm not communicating, or if I'm not around people, then I'm probably not using my strengths. But actually, okay, so if I'm not using around people, what other strengths can I use or lean into to maybe get the best out of that task?
Yeah. So, for example, I was in a sales role for a little while. Not something that came naturally to me, because in some of my lower bars are persuasiveness, relationship building, which is about networking, decisiveness, resilience isn't particularly big for me. And again, that's not saying that I'm not resilient, but I don't get energized by taking on big challenges. That's not a big driver for me. So with those things in mind, when I had to do like an hour of cold calling, I used to smoke, and I'd go out and I'd have 3 cigarettes beforehand. And after that hour of cold calling, I remember once going into a meeting and I almost couldn't speak because I'd been working so hard to areas that drained me. But then if I'm doing it differently now, I'm leaning into my strength. So my way will be much more collaborative, much more educational. So tell me about the problem that you've got. Let me educate you as to our product, about how that actually might make a difference to you. Let's work out what the barriers are together and see where we can go forward. That comes really, really naturally because I'm playing to my strengths. And I think that that's sometimes the danger. And I think that this is sometimes we see it in sport as well, where it is kind of like a prescriptive, this is how you do it. If you don't give that person space to be able to find their own solution, to be able to express themselves in the right and authentic way, you're not going to get the best from that person. You know,
and I think what's important on that example is you have to know your people.
Yes, and they have to know themselves.
Yeah, because both sides, right? And this is where I think Strengthscope and all these other assessments add value, is because it allows the individual to understand themselves slightly better. It allows the leader and the manager to understand their people better, and so because that person might need that freedom and choice to understand that, but actually that one other person might need the directness and the direction for what and how to do something. And so that's the important part, I think. Look, my last question, the last thing I want to explore, and it actually ties in really well to what we just spoke about, is that role of a leader, the role of a manager. What is their role when implementing strengths for their people?
I think that's a really great question, and almost the kind of what you just talked about. I think it's important to be open and curious, not to kind of go, right, I've seen your wheel, you need to be doing this, this, and this, because on top of this, right, the chances of you getting the purple bars here are what we call your significant 7 strengths. So they're the ones that are most likely to bring you energy, most likely to have natural talent. The chances of you getting the same significant 7 strengths in the same ranking order as anybody else is 1 in 1.3 billion. So there might be 2 other people in the world that will have that same combination in the same order of significant 7 strengths. So that's pretty unique, but that's not taking into account that person, their life experience, their work experience as well. So I think it's important that if managers are looking to implement strengths, that they come from a place of curiosity and ask questions. So, for example, I see that you've got collaboration strength. Give me an example about how that's really helped you in your work. Where are there other opportunities that you think that strength can help you be really successful? Are there any projects that you think that strength could really kind of make a difference on and help us move forward with? So being able to kind of very much go in that coach space, ask those questions, be able to kind of find that out. And then as you're able to kind of build that picture of your team, it's about going, okay, maybe we've been playing the wrong formation for a long time. Maybe we need to go 3 at the back. Maybe we need a number 10 to be able to just be the person that's going around solving problems, creating opportunities, because then you're able to kind of go, this is who I've got. This is my team. And that also deepens connections, because when we're talking about strengths, because our definition is these are underlying qualities, these are going to feel much more personal than just skills. So you're really seeing that person. You're hearing what it is that's going to help them be your best. And if you're able to give them opportunities to play to those strengths, you're going to see them in a very different light. It's going to really help you in terms of your succession planning, in terms of when you do need to go through change. Who can help you through that? How can you leverage other people's strengths? How can you manage them and support them through change, knowing what drives them, knowing what energizes them, but also what doesn't, so that you're able to not necessarily stop them from having to do stuff that they don't want to do. That's not the game at all. But to get them to think about how they strategize, how they can use their strengths in different situations to still be able to get the outcomes that are needed. And I think that kind of coaching mentality as a leader, as a manager, is the way to get the most from individual strengths in the teams that they lead and they run.
Yeah. It's a really nice insight. I guess this is a question around Strengthscope. How much of that support towards the manager do you guys supply?
Well, we think it's worth doing an awful lot more, and I think that this is a big challenge. And actually, I think that we did a report that's available on our website, which is called the Team Effectiveness in the Workplace Report, that came out in January. And actually, what we found was, because we've got a tool which is Strengthscope Leader, that gives them feedback not just on how their strengths are showing up as a leader, but also 4 key leadership habits around sharing vision, sparking engagement, skillfully executing and sustaining progress, which are kind of core leadership skills, are within there, and they get rated on that. Their perception of how effective they are compared to the perception of the audiences that gave them the feedback has dropped 75% in the past 5 years. So they've got less understanding about how they can be effective. And I think that's one of the big things that we try and do as part of this, is we don't separate the leader from the team. In fact, the leader probably needs as much, if not more, support in terms of how they're using their strengths really effectively. Because they've got that downwards leading, they've got the peer-to-peer sideways relationships, they've got to be able to manage upwards as well. So being able to recognize and help them think about how they can be agile and authentic and still be able to drive performance is really one of the key things in terms of getting a team to support. Because if the leader's not bought into it, the team can feel as though they're playing to their strengths, but it's just going to die. Everybody looks upwards for the behaviors. I mean, you saw it with, he's my hero because I'm an Aberdeen fan, but with Fergie, he set the tone for what it was to be at Man United. And you look at where the club are now, and because of all the significant changes, and without that clarity from the leader, and with that leader being able to reinvent themselves according to the challenges that they're facing, with that deep understanding of themselves, they're struggling. And I think that's something that business can kind of take a bit of a reflection on. How can you support your leaders to continue to grow in the changing climate that we're operating in, and then allow them the space to allow their teams to thrive according to their own potential strengths and opportunities.
Yeah. My brain was going to so many different examples when you were talking. There were so many different key parts, which I found really, really interesting.
And Strengthscope has been used in sports before. We've worked with Sport Ireland, we've worked with Sport England. We were used, I can't remember which Olympics it was, by the British equestrian team as well. So getting this understanding, particularly of how a team is going to work together, understanding the dynamics. So where are the shared energies, for example? So if everybody's really focused on results, that can be really, really powerful, but potentially at the expense of where else? Is there maybe a lack of collaboration? Do you then have a bunch of individuals that are really focused on their own targets, not necessarily on the collective goal and the experience that's going through? So being able to understand that can be super powerful as well.
I'm going to ask one question, a penultimate question. And this is interesting because it goes back to leadership. If you get your report back and you see on there that as a leader, maybe your scores aren't great as a leadership strengths, what then?
Well, it really comes down to, we've got specific definitions. So again, what this isn't is a scorecard of how good you are. It's where you get energy. So that definition of leading, which I have, is around being able to influence and bring people together towards a common goal of a team or an organization. So I really enjoy being able to, as I did at CIPD, stand up, get people excited about how they could use strengths towards helping their people. I know someone that doesn't have leading as a strength, who's a highly effective CEO, because he doesn't do that. He stands up, he opens up a monthly all hands meeting, and then he hands it over to the people who have done it. So he doesn't have to be in the limelight. He isn't then in that place where he's in a draining space. He's maybe stumbling over words. He went on lots of public speaking courses, but there was still a challenge. It was because it drained him. It didn't come naturally to him. He didn't get energized by it. So he was always going in from that negative, fear-based perspective from it. Whereas him being able to open up and kind of going, here's what the results were this month. I'm going to hand you over and these people are going to tell you how they did it. Fitted him like a glove. Developing others was one of his big strengths. So he loved being able to help other people fulfill their potential. It didn't have to be all about him. So it's about how you lead authentically according to those strengths to get the outcomes that you're looking for.
That really rings a bell with the Richard Branson story.
Yeah.
The concept of you buy the areas, or you pay for the areas you're no good at.
Yeah.
And I feel like that is, well, I'm going to not use those as much as possible, but I'm actually going to find other people to do that for me.
And I think that, again, this comes down to people's perceptions of leaders. Do they expect every leader to be like a Churchill-style figure? And also, how are leaders measuring their own success? Because as you get higher and higher up, it just comes down to that bottom line figure. There's it's a much more complex role as a leader than just being able to hit your P&L. So are you measuring how you're being effective with your team? Are you helping to see how you're keeping retention high in your team and keeping your talent and developing your talent? Because that's the thing that will keep setting you up for success when maybe market conditions are maybe the thing that are stopping you hitting that bottom line revenue number.
Yeah, completely agree. Look, I'm going to close this out with my last question. It's always the same question. What top 3 tips do you have for people in organization to use their strengths more?
First of all, I think you've got to understand them. And you've got to understand, as you said, that difference between strengths and skills. So even if you're not quite ready to use Strengthscope, take 2 minutes to reflect on what are the things that help you be at your best. Do a little visualization exercise. Remember a time when you really were in flow and you achieved really great results. Think about the tasks, the interactions with other people and the environment that helped you do that, and try and play to that more. You might start to understand that a bit more as well. Second one is be curious and create space for people to have conversations about how to be at their best. How, especially as leaders, or if you're in L&D, how can you create the time to allow them to do a bit of that reflection, to be able to apply that to their role and their potential career path as well. And I guess, obviously, one of the top tips would be to use an assessment like Strengthscope Strengthscope is very different from other strengths assessments in the fact that it's got registered test status from the British Psychological Society. And what that means is it's reliable and valid. So you're not going to see significant changes over time. And that then helps people set them up for their career choices. It's certainly what happened with me. I realized that I was driven by being able to help people fulfill their potential, which is why I made the choice to move from a commercial role into this role that I now have at Strengthscope. And it's serving me well. I enjoy and love what I do. I'm interested and excited about where I can go in the future as well. And from someone who didn't have very much ambitions, I now have very big ambitions for where I want to end up. So do be able to allow people to be able to understand and play to their strengths more and more, and you will see the results.
Yeah, love that. Thank you, Scott. Really appreciate it. A lot of value. And lots of great examples, like I knew there would be. Thank you for your time.
We didn't even get into the strengths of Cristiano Ronaldo and Lionel Messi. Next time.
Yeah, next time. Yeah, maybe we just do a podcast on comparison between the two. No, I hope everybody else found their real value in that. Obviously, they can find you on LinkedIn and have conversations there around it. But I really look forward to seeing what you bring continuously over the next kind of few years. Yeah, thank you ever so much. Stay where you are. Everybody else, thank you for joining. Next week, I've got Charlie McCall on, who is a performance and lifestyle coach from UK Sports Institute. So that'd be a really great conversation as well around performance. It'll be interesting to see how strengths comes into her conversation as well. But everybody, yeah, have a lovely weekend, and I will see you all soon. Take care.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Bye-bye.